The British royal family stands as an enduring symbol of tradition, resilience, and continuity. For over a millennium, they have been woven into the very fabric of English and later British history. From the Norman Conquest in 1066 to the present day, the monarchy has witnessed and often shaped the destiny of a nation. Their reigns have been marked by times of great upheaval and times of unprecedented peace. Through it all, the royal family remained a constant presence, a symbol of national identity. This journey through time begins with William the Conqueror, whose victory at the Battle of Hastings in 1066 irrevocably altered the course of English history. From the Norman Conquest to the establishment of the Plantagenet Dynasty, England underwent significant transformations. The construction of grand castles, the introduction of Norman law, and the intertwining of English and French cultures became hallmarks of this era. The year 1066 stands as a pivotal moment in English history. It marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule and the beginning of the Norman era. William, Duke of Normandy, also known as William the Conqueror, laid claim to the English throne, challenging the legitimacy of the newly crowned King Harold Godwinson. Harold, the last of the Anglo-Saxon kings, had been elected by the Witan, the Council of Nobles, but William claimed his right to the throne through a distant familial connection and a supposed oath of support from Harold himself. The stage was set for a clash of titans, a battle that would determine the fate of England. The two armies met on a hill near Hastings in the south of England. The Battle of Hastings, fought on October 14, 1066, was a brutal and bloody affair. The Anglo-Saxon forces, armed with axes and shields, fought bravely, but were ultimately outmaneuvered by the Norman cavalry and archers. Harold was killed in battle, struck in the eye with an arrow according to legend, and with his death, Anglo-Saxon rule came to an end. William the Conqueror's death in 1087 ushered in a new chapter in English history, one marked by both continuity and change. William's sons, William Rufus and Henry, inherited different parts of his vast domains. William Rufus, the second son, became King William II of England, while his elder brother Robert inherited Normandy. Henry, the youngest, received a sum of money but no land. The division of William the Conqueror's lands among his sons would have significant consequences for the future of England and Normandy. Henry I's death without a male heir plunged England into a period of civil war known as the Anarchy. Henry had declared his daughter Matilda as his heir, but her claim to the throne was challenged by her cousin, Stephen of Blois. Stephen, grandson of William the Conqueror through his daughter Adela, was a powerful nobleman with close ties to the English aristocracy. He moved quickly to seize the throne upon hearing of Henry's death, and was crowned king within weeks. Matilda, however, refused to relinquish her claim to the throne. She had the support of her half-brother, Robert of Gloucester, an illegitimate son of Henry I, and other powerful barons who remained loyal to Henry's memory. Thus began a long and bloody conflict that would tear England apart for nearly 2 decades. The Anarchy was a chaotic and brutal period, characterized by shifting alliances, sieges, and battles that brought suffering and devastation to the English countryside. The death of Stephen in 1154 marked the end of the tumultuous period known as the Anarchy and ushered in a new era in English history with the accession of Henry of Anjou, Matilda's son, as King Henry II. Henry's coronation marked the beginning of the Plantagenet Dynasty, a dynasty that would rule England for over 3 centuries and leave an indelible mark on the country's history. Henry II, a man of great energy and ambition, inherited a kingdom weakened by years of civil war, but also a vast Angevin empire that stretched from the Scottish borders to the Pyrenees Mountains in France. Henry II set about restoring order and consolidating his power with characteristic vigor. He ruthlessly suppressed rebellions, imposed royal authority on the fractious baronage, and implemented legal reforms that would form the basis of English common law for centuries to come. He established royal courts, introduced the use of juries, and expanded the scope of royal justice. Henry's legal reforms, though controversial at the time, helped to centralize power in the hands of the monarchy and lay the foundation for a more unified and efficient legal system in England. Henry II's death in 1189 brought his son, Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart, to the throne. Richard, a charismatic and skilled warrior, was more interested in military glory than in the day-to-day affairs of governing England. He spent much of his reign on crusade, leading the Third Crusade to the Holy Land, in an attempt to recapture Jerusalem from the Muslim forces under Saladin. Richard's exploits in the Holy Land, though ultimately unsuccessful in achieving their main objective, cemented his reputation as a legendary warrior king, a figure celebrated in both English and French literature and song. Richard's absence from England, however, had consequences for the stability of the realm. His younger brother John, entrusted with governing England in Richard's absence, proved to be an unpopular and ineffective ruler. John's attempts to raise taxes to fund Richard's crusades and his own military adventures alienated the English barons. Richard's death in 1199 while besieging a castle in France plunged England into a period of instability and rebellion. The reigns of Edward I from 1272 to 1307 and his grandson Edward III from 1327 to 1377 marked a period of significant military expansion and consolidation for the Plantagenet Dynasty. These warrior kings left an indelible mark on the British Isles and on the European stage, shaping the destiny of England and Wales for centuries to come. Their reigns, however, were also marked by brutal conflicts and shifting alliances that would sow the seeds of future turmoil. Edward I, known as Longshanks for his impressive height, was a formidable warrior and a shrewd administrator. He focused his military ambitions on Wales, seeking to subjugate the Welsh principalities and bring them under English rule. Through a series of successful campaigns, Edward I conquered Wales, building imposing castles like Caernarfon, Conwy, and Harlech to consolidate his control over the newly conquered territory. He also established the title of Prince of Wales for his heir apparent, a tradition that continues to this day. The deposition of Richard II in 1399, orchestrated by his cousin Henry Bolingbroke, Duke of Lancaster, marked a turning point in English history. Henry, crowned King Henry IV, was the first monarch of the House of Lancaster, a branch of the Plantagenet Dynasty that would rule England for much of the 15th century. Henry IV's reign, however, was far from secure. His seizure of the throne from his rightful king, even though Richard II was widely seen as an ineffective and unpopular ruler, set a dangerous precedent and ignited a series of challenges to his authority. Henry IV faced rebellions from discontented nobles, Welsh uprisings led by Owain Glyndwr, and the ever-present threat of Scottish incursions across the border. He spent much of his reign consolidating his power and trying to legitimize his claim to the throne, which was based on shaky ground. He promoted the use of English in government and the courts, a departure from the Norman French that had been the language of the elite since the conquest. Henry V's untimely death in 1422 at the age of 35 left the throne of England to his infant son, Henry VI, a child of 9 months. Henry VI's long reign, though marked by periods of peace and prosperity, would ultimately be overshadowed by his weak rule, his mental instability, and the outbreak of a bloody dynastic conflict known as the Wars of the Roses. These wars, fought between the houses of Lancaster and York, their emblem a white rose for control of the English throne, would tear England apart for 3 decades, leaving a lasting scar on the country's psyche. The seeds of the Wars of the Roses were sown during the reign of Henry VI. As Henry grew older, it became increasingly apparent that he was not a strong or decisive ruler. He suffered bouts of mental illness, possibly inherited from his maternal grandfather, Charles VI of France, who had also experienced periods of insanity. Henry's weakness and instability created a power vacuum at the heart of English politics, allowing ambitious nobles to jockey for power and influence. The House of York, descended from a younger son of Edward III, emerged as the primary challengers to the Lancastrian dynasty. Richard, Duke of York, claimed the throne through his descent from Lionel of Antwerp, an elder son of Edward III, arguing that his claim was stronger than that of the Lancastrians, who were descended from John of Gaunt, a younger son of Edward III. Richard of York's claim, though based on shaky legal grounds, resonated with powerful nobles who were dissatisfied with the Lancastrian regime and saw an opportunity to advance their own interests. in 1455, Richard of York, with the support of powerful allies like the Earl of Salisbury and the Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker for his ability to influence the course of the conflict, raised an army and marched on London. The first battle of the Wars of the Roses was fought at St. Albans north of London on May 22, 1455. The Yorkists emerged victorious, capturing King Henry VI and killing several prominent Lancastrian leaders. The Battle of St. Albans marked the beginning of a long and bloody conflict that would engulf England in a cycle of violence and retribution. The Battle of Bosworth Field, fought on a misty morning in August 1485, marked a watershed moment in English history. It signaled the end of the tumultuous Wars of the Roses, a dynastic conflict that had plagued England for 3 decades and ushered in a new era under the reign of Henry Tudor, crowned King Henry VII. Henry, a distant relative of the Lancastrian kings, had defeated and killed Richard III, the last Yorkist king, securing the throne for himself and his heirs. His victory at Bosworth Field marked the beginning of the Tudor dynasty, a dynasty that would rule England for over a century and transform the country into a major European power. Henry VII, a shrewd and pragmatic ruler, was acutely aware of the challenges he faced. England was weary of war and instability. The power of the nobility had been greatly diminished by decades of conflict, but Henry knew that he could not afford to alienate those who had the potential to challenge his authority. He set about consolidating his power carefully, rewarding his supporters while ruthlessly crushing any hint of dissent. Henry VIII, the second Tudor king, ascended to the throne in 1509 upon the death of his father, Henry VII. He inherited a stable and prosperous kingdom, thanks to his father's prudent rule. Henry VIII, however, was a very different ruler from his cautious and calculating father. He was a larger-than-life figure, known for his athleticism, his love of hunting and feasting, and his insatiable appetite for power and glory. Henry VIII's reign would mark a period of profound change and upheaval in English history as he broke with the Roman Catholic Church, established the Church of England, and transformed the country into a Protestant nation. Henry VIII's break with Rome was driven by a complex interplay of personal, political, and religious factors. One of the main catalysts for the English Reformation was Henry's desire to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, whom he had married in 1509. Catherine had failed to produce a male heir, and Henry, obsessed with securing the Tudor succession, had become enamored with Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine. Henry appealed to Pope Clement VII for an annulment, arguing that his marriage to Catherine was invalid because she had been married to his brother, Arthur, Prince of Wales, who had died shortly after their marriage. Henry VIII's death in 1547 left the throne to his young son, Edward VI, the son of his third wife, Jane Seymour. Edward was a sickly child who ascended the throne at the age of 9. Despite his young age, Edward was a staunch Protestant, and his reign saw the continuation of the religious reforms initiated by his father. Under the guidance of Protestant advisors like Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, and John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, Edward oversaw the establishment of a more radical Protestant church in England. Edward VI's reign, however, was short-lived. He died in 1553 at the age of 15, probably from tuberculosis. His death sparked a succession crisis as his half-sister Mary, a devout Catholic and the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, challenged the claim of Lady Jane Grey, Edward VI's cousin, and the granddaughter of Henry VIII's younger sister, Mary Tudor. Lady Jane Grey was proclaimed queen by the Privy Council, but her reign lasted only 9 days before Mary, with widespread popular support, entered London and claimed the throne for herself. The death of Elizabeth in 1603 marked the end of the Tudor dynasty and the beginning of the Stuart era in English history. Elizabeth, the last of Henry VIII's children to rule England, died childless, leaving the throne to her cousin, James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. James, a Protestant descendant of Henry VII through his great-grandmother, Margaret Tudor, became King James I of England, uniting the crowns of England and Scotland under a single monarch for the first time in history. This union of the crowns was a momentous event, laying the foundation for the future United Kingdom of Great Britain. James I, a scholar king who had ruled Scotland for 36 years before ascending to the English throne, was eager to assert his authority as King of England. He believed in the divine right of kings, the idea that monarchs derived their authority directly from God and were answerable only to God. This belief in absolute monarchy would bring him into conflict with Parliament, which had grown accustomed to playing a more assertive role in government during the Tudor era, especially under Elizabeth I, who had skillfully managed her relationship with Parliament, using her charisma and political acumen to win their support. Charles I, James I's son, ascended to the throne in 1625. Charles, unlike his father, was less interested in theological debates and more concerned with asserting his authority as king. He inherited from his father a belief in the divine right of kings and a deep distrust of Parliament, which he saw as an obstacle to his absolute rule. Charles I's reign would be marked by escalating tensions with Parliament, religious conflict, and ultimately, civil war, a conflict that would tear England apart and lead to the execution of the king. Charles's relationship with Parliament was strained from the outset. He needed money to finance his wars with Spain and France, but Parliament, suspicious of his motives and his lavish spending, was reluctant to grant him the funds he requested. Charles, frustrated by Parliament's resistance, resorted to raising money through forced loans and other extra-parliamentary measures, further alienating his opponents. His marriage to Henrietta Maria, the Catholic sister of Louis XIII of France, heightened religious tensions in England, as many Protestants feared that Charles's Catholic wife would exert undue influence on the king and undermine the Protestant Reformation in England. The English Civil War, which had raged across England, Scotland, and Ireland for nearly a decade, had a profound impact on English society and politics. The monarchy was abolished, the House of Lords was disempowered, and England became a republic, albeit one dominated by the army and its charismatic leader, Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell, a devout Puritan and a brilliant military strategist, had emerged as the dominant figure in the aftermath of the Civil War, crushing royalist uprisings in Ireland and Scotland and establishing himself as Lord Protector of England, Scotland, and Ireland in 1653. Cromwell's rule, though marked by stability and military success, was not universally popular. He faced opposition from royalists who yearned for the restoration of the monarchy, as well as from Republicans who opposed his dictatorial rule. Cromwell's death in 1658, followed by the brief and ineffectual rule of his son Richard, plunged England into a period of political uncertainty. The army, once the backbone of Cromwell's power, was now divided and disillusioned. The death of Queen Anne in 1714 marked the end of the Stuart dynasty and ushered in a new era in British history with the accession of George, Elector of Hanover, as King George I. Anne, the last of the Stuart monarchs, died without a living heir, despite having been pregnant 17 times. The Act of Settlement of 1701 had paved the way for a Protestant succession to the throne, excluding any Catholic claimants, and stipulated that the crown would pass to Sophia, Electress of Hanover, and her Protestant heirs. Sophia was a granddaughter of James I and the closest Protestant relative to the English throne. George I, Sophia's son, was a German prince with little knowledge of England or its language. He spoke no English, and his accession marked the beginning of a period in which the British monarchs were more German than English in their outlook and sympathies. George I's reign, and that of his son George II, saw the rise of the Whig Party, which favored a strong parliament and limited royal power. The Whigs, who had been instrumental in engineering the glorious revolution that had deposed James II, were rewarded with positions of power and influence under the Hanoverian monarchs. George III, the grandson of George II, ascended to the throne in 1760. Unlike his German-born predecessors, George III was born and raised in England and was determined to rule as an English king. He was a man of strong moral principles, a devoted family man, and a conscientious ruler who took his responsibilities seriously. George III's long reign, spanning over 6 decades, would witness a period of unprecedented change and upheaval, including the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Napoleonic Wars. George III's reign began auspiciously. He appointed Lord Bute, a close friend and advisor, as his prime minister, and together they sought to break the Whig dominance in government and assert greater royal control over British politics. George III's attempts to strengthen the monarchy, however, were met with resistance from Parliament and the public, who viewed his actions as a threat to the constitutional balance of power that had been established since the Glorious Revolution. The dawn of the 20th century brought with it a sense of both progress and unease. The Victorian era, with its emphasis on stability and tradition, had given way to a new era marked by rapid technological advancements, social change, and growing international tensions. In Britain, the monarchy, under the reign of Edward VII, the eldest son of Queen Victoria, had adapted to the changing times, embracing a more modern and cosmopolitan outlook while upholding the traditions and ceremonies associated with the British crown. Edward VII's reign, though relatively short, from 1901 to 1910, saw a period of relative peace and prosperity for Britain, as the country enjoyed its status as a global superpower, its vast empire spanning the globe. Edward VII's death in 1910 brought his son George V to the throne. George V, a more serious and reserved figure than his father, inherited a kingdom on the brink of change. The Edwardian era, with its carefree elegance and social whirl, was about to be swept away by the cataclysm of the First World War, a conflict that would shatter the old order and reshape the political landscape of Europe. George V, though initially reluctant to become king, rose to the challenges of his reign, providing steadfast leadership during a time of unprecedented crisis. George V's death in 1936 brought his eldest son, Edward, Prince of Wales, to the throne as Edward VIII. Edward, a charismatic and popular figure, had been a glamorous presence on the world stage, known for his charm, his fashion sense, and his somewhat unconventional lifestyle. His reign, however, would be short and tumultuous, ending abruptly in December 1936 when he made the decision to abdicate the throne in order to marry Wallis Simpson, an American socialite who was twice divorced. Edward VIII's relationship with Wallis Simpson created a constitutional crisis in Britain. The Church of England, of which the British monarch is the supreme governor, did not permit divorced people to remarry in church if their former spouse was still living. Edward's determination to marry Wallis, coupled with his refusal to renounce his relationship with her, put him at odds with the government and the church. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin advised Edward that he could not remain king and marry Wallis, as the marriage would be unacceptable to the British public and the Dominions. The Second World War, which had raged across the globe from 1939 to 1945, left Britain victorious but exhausted. The country faced the daunting task of rebuilding its shattered economy and adjusting to its diminished role on the world stage. The British Empire, once a symbol of global power and influence, was rapidly dismantling as colonies in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean gained their independence. George VI, his health weakened by the stress of war and years of heavy smoking, guided Britain through the difficult post-war years with quiet dignity, providing a sense of stability and continuity during a time of profound change. George VI's death in 1952 at the age of 56, from lung cancer, brought his elder daughter, Princess Elizabeth, to the throne as Queen Elizabeth II. Elizabeth, who had celebrated her 21st birthday while on a tour of South Africa with her parents, ascended the throne at the age of 25, a young queen for a new Elizabethan age. Her coronation in 1953, a lavish ceremony watched by millions around the world, marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the British monarchy, one that would see the monarchy adapt to the changing times and embrace a more modern and accessible image. As we stand at the precipice of the 21st century, the British monarchy stands as a testament to the enduring power of tradition and adaptation. From the Norman Conquest to the present day, the monarchy has weathered storms of revolution, war, and social change, emerging time and again as a symbol of national identity and continuity. The crown has served as a unifying force, a source of stability during periods of uncertainty, and a reflection of the evolving values and aspirations of the British people. The reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest in British history, has been a remarkable journey through the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st. Her reign witnessed profound transformations in British society, from the dismantling of the empire to the rise of a multicultural and interconnected world. Through it all, she remained a steadfast and reassuring presence, adapting to the changing times while upholding the traditions and values associated with the British monarchy. With the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, a significant chapter in British history came to a close. Her son, King Charles III, ascended to the throne, marking the beginning of a new era. As the new monarch, King Charles III faces the challenge of continuing the legacy of his mother while navigating the complexities of a modern and ever-changing world. The British monarchy's story is not merely a tale of kings and queens, but a reflection of the hopes, struggles, and triumphs of the British people themselves. It is a story of conquest and consolidation, of religious upheaval and political transformation, of war and peace, and of the enduring search for identity and purpose. Through it all, the monarchy has served as a thread connecting generations, a tangible link to the past, and a source of inspiration for the future. As the British monarchy navigates the complexities of the 21st century, it faces the ongoing challenge of balancing tradition with modernity. The monarchy must continue to evolve and adapt to the changing values and expectations of British society while remaining true to its core principles of duty, service, and continuity. The Crown's ability to strike this delicate balance will be crucial to its continued relevance and resonance in the years to come.